Good morning. Long time no see.
Oh, how's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. End of my day on Tuesday,
Oh yeah, it's what, like 4 over there or something?
4:30.
Nice. I think I got it down now.
Yeah, your time zones are in check.
Yeah, I guess you kind of have to. I'm still like trying to figure out APAC, but we'll get there. So, uh but
Yeah, when the
big
time zone when the daylight savings align, it's 12 hours shifted from me. I think it's like in summer, uh, New Zealand is 12 hours from Czech, so it's easy to remember,
that's
but
easy, yeah.
hard
Hard to
to find a slot for a meeting.
yeah, you're telling me that's crazy. You have to basically be on at, well, you could do like maybe 8 and 8, but that's still pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
that's
I feel like that's the
usually.
most reasonable one, right? Or 7 and 7.
7 and 7 is usually what I do.
That's wild.
Hey, Jean Gabriel.
Jean Gabriel.
All right, this is gonna be a quiet one. Maybe we can storm through it quickly.
Yeah.
Let's
Is
let's have a
everybody
look.
on break, I'm assuming?
Not sure, not sure. Lena was telling me that she won't be able to make it because she's now like she won't have a power, so she just won't have internet at this time.
Nice.
And other people, I don't know. Anyway, let's go quickly through agenda. I'll just go turn off all my chats and share my screen. Sharing screen. Oh, close other tabs. Here we go. All right. So, welcome, Angelo and Jean Gabriel. Uh, this is what we usually do here is that we have a look at the voting results. This milestone, we didn't have a success to feeding them into the team's agenda. It was pretty busy. And I think that we had a few slippages, like for example, not slippages, but we had already work on the previous voting results, still getting into this milestone. So we weren't, for example, the most upvoted that voting result last time was to create EDK, which is just like a create extension development kit. Something that Angelo has been doing since the moment he started at the team, and making it something like
Barely
a
doing it. Barely doing.
no. I'm using the watch script every day. So something like the watch script, but with like ideally a scenario where you check out a folder, it will check out all the extensions in it and maybe like configure the language server so it runs over a TCP connection so you can like connect to the language server from JetBrains or from VS Code and it would like live reload all the jazz. So that was the most uploaded last time and it's scheduled, but it's scheduled in the like next 3 milestones. That's like a milestone. So anyway, going to this avocado results, the most uploaded was to introduce end-to-end tests with WebID. So making sure that the extension is not breaking WebID. And I think that's a super useful. I voted for that as well.
Yeah.
That would be yeah, just great because now we get the feedback in we introduce a change that for whatever reason breaks the compatibility with WebID, and we learn about it 3 weeks later when everybody has moved on from having the
Yeah.
context on working on the initial
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, that would be. that would be great. Then the next next most upvoted is to identify more features to cover with end-to-end tests in the extension. So now we have one end-to-end test, and it is amazing because before that, I used to do smoke testing before release if I felt like we touched authentication or just touched some core way how we built the extension. I was doing smoke testing. Now I don't because the end-to-end tests are just fantastic. They test authentication and code suggestions. But this spike is to just cover more features with those tests.
Yeah.
And then we've got these ones that are all 2 words, and it's some issues with debugging the language server. I notice it on and off. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there, but when you just debug the language server, sometimes I see minified code there, or the minified names of variables that don't match the code that I'm seeing.
One issue that's not related to that, but rings a bell is the fact that we're still using Node 18.
Mhm.
Do we have that like as votable? Because I feel like that's definitely very pressing. Um,
Yeah. Uh,
Especially because Node 18 is end of life next year, I think.
Yeah,
Like,
it is. It is like April, I think April 25. And relatively recently, still, maybe 4 months ago, VS Code moved from 18 to 20, and that was the thing that's one of
yeah,
the 2 reasons that were hindering us. One was we were waiting for VS Code to move, and the second one is I think that the PKG that we use to build binaries in language server is
yeah,
not
it
compatible with
doesn't work.
20. Yeah, so those 2 things, I believe those issues are captured, but I don't think they are votable. So if I just open what would it be? I'm looking for something in language server issues. What would
Yeah,
it be?
we have to
PKG.
maybe tech debt or something.
Yeah,
I know Tristan made it. Oh wait, here it is to 20 or 22. The one Tristan made. I think this has it.
yeah, it's not tech dev. It doesn't have any labels. I'll add them. And tech debt. Okay. Yeah, and I think that what was it? Yeah, you're right. Probably this might be blocked by the upgrade, or maybe not. It worked before, but it might be solved itself. These
With the
things
upgrade, yeah.
with the upgrade.
The only thing
Um,
is like the binaries. I tried attempting to do it like once or twice, and it's like it's definitely not trivial. The
mhm.
binary part.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there and the binary thing that Node uses is still experimental. Um, yeah, so that's gonna be interesting. Maybe we should
Mm.
just switch to Deno or something.
Yeah, that's where to go.
Because
All right. So,
they let you build a binary like with a command. It's amazing.
mhm. So
But
this is again not having the label tech debt. That's the binary in the language server issue. Yeah, Tristan linked it in this one.
okay, cool.
Okay, so that seems like that's the biggest. I'm not sure whether it's blocker for that, but it might be more important than this. It's definitely going to be on the radar now. We can maybe vote on it and pick it up next month. I'm not sure whether we'll have a capacity to tackle it before that.
Yeah,
Yeah, this one's automated schema validation for GraphQL queries. That's something that I would really very much like to see
yeah, we need
done.
that.
It's still doesn't solve complete all the issues, but at least my idea with my and Tristan's idea when we talked about it was that every GraphQL request would have mandatory field saying what's the GraphQL version that this is supported in. That would like make engineers like think about it when they are introducing new queries, and then we would all have them in some one place and run a automated test that would test that the schema from that version of GitLab is able to handle that query. Create a client tracking context provider. Okay.
About the last one that you just showed, I'm interested in following the what you do in VS Code or Data, whichever, because we might want to do that also in JetBrains or like as long as there are GraphQL queries, like we should probably have that in our extension.
Yeah.
Make sure.
100%. We would migrate that approach to the VS Code extension as well, where it would be a little bit simpler because it's the same stack. But as we are trying to move more and more logic in the language server, hopefully we will get a good value from language server alone.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what this is, even though I started some discussion. I'm just gonna... Right. There is a little bit of duplicated logic between the telemetry trackers. So this is something that provides tracking context. That's a duplicated logic. This would unify it. That seems like a doable thing, and remove legacy approach for managing. I'm so happy to say that this is this. I'll actually have a agenda item about this, so I'm not gonna steal my thunder with this. But this is gonna be closed once this merge request gets reviewed and merged. So way ahead of the voting here. All right, so we've got the voting results. What we do with those is that we take them and put them on our planning issue for next milestone, and we'll see how much capacity the team has to handle this maintenance, and we pick from the top. That's all we do. Now, we can go to the agenda points, which are both here, and then I copied the ones from the maintainer issue down below. So let's start here. I suggest that we will use the pattern that John introduced, and we'll always put a logger as a DI dependency. Where would it be? Like test logger. Looking for the. Here we go. You add a logger as a dependency to your class that you are putting in the DI container, and then in a constructor you give it prefix, something reasonable. Doesn't necessarily have to be exactly the name of the service, but that's usually what it is. And then you use that logger instead of the global logger. So that's one pattern I suggest that we start using.
Yeah, that sounds
What
good.
do you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think in general, like, it would be really nice that you just inject your logger as a dependency for any service, and then you do like this .log, and it automatically prefixes, because right now we're just doing like manual prefixes in the string. I think it'd be super nice if like because I think Nest.js has this where yeah, you just inject your logger, and then if you call that in the service, it'll basically show like maybe the class name as like the as the log. I think that would be really cool, and really helpful. But I don't know,
Gotcha.
might be that might be controversial, more opinionated, but we're
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
moving to like the services approach, like we might as well. So like when customers are like sending debug logs, we can know exactly what service is log, it's going through. But I don't
Yeah.
It will
Like
also
I
prevent.
was. Sorry, go, Jean Gabriel.
I was going to say it will also prevent copy and paste mistakes. Like when you instantiate a class, you're like, how do I do this? I forgot. Then you go and copy and paste. You forget to change the prefix thing. And but let's say if you inject it and you automatically assign a prefix, then we just prevent this. Not that it's going to happen often, but these things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, we would have to introduce some kind of a first class concept for these are some global injectables that are, like something like a pre-inject hook for certain dependencies. Like you would say, there is a pre-inject hook for logger that will figure out, like, one of the parameters of the hook is going to be where is it being injected to, and the hook can then call with prefix and change the global logger is something that sounds like it could be done generically and it could work. Yeah, if we open issue for it, we can have a look at it. I wouldn't want to like make a logging the first class citizen necessarily, but I think something like this generic wouldn't be too much harder to implement, and it would work for any dependencies that we want to inject to many, like any utility dependencies.
Yeah, we can open an issue. Yeah, we should definitely do that. I think that would help.
Okay. The next item is Tristan asking whether we want to use RxJS somewhere else than just in a config. So if you have a look at the epic, Tristan suggesting that we'll use RxJS for config because you can do querying on the object. So you can say I'm only subscribing to this subpath. You can do debouncing, which would be really useful for the language server. When we initialize VS Code extension, we send the config like 5 times.
Yeah,
so the debouncing will be.
I've always wondered, why is that? Why do we send it like 4 or 5 times?
It's because we react on when the extension is initializing, it reacts on the source code management, like the Git extension from VS Code.
Yeah.
And every time there is some change in it, we reload what projects we have available and whatnot, and we send that config to the language server. And the Git extension is initializing, starts with 0 and then goes like, here is here is one repository, here is other repository, and all of these trigger events. That's one reason. I think there is one more, but like a reaction to the Git extension is mainly what. And then you've like, first you found the repository that triggers event, and then you look at the remotes and that triggers another event. And then from that, we go and query GitLab API, find out that the repository is backed up by GitLab project that triggers an event. And even with like 2 repositories, you end up with like 6 config updates at the beginning. So
Yeah.
which is not a problem, because the config updates don't trigger, like in the VS Code extension, they don't trigger any extra. There is no flickering necessarily, like unnecessary flickering. You only see flicker the items that are being updated, but the language server shouldn't have to react to it like 6 times in the first second.
Yeah. There's something we definitely need to figure out, because with the repository service, it's like pretty heavy on compute. So that's one reluctance I have for turning it on, is like it just being run 6 times, the whole initialization of it. So
yeah, that's a good point. Like there should be something like a diff. Like I guess the repository service could guard itself with like a diff check, like saying like what was the previous config and what is the new one, what is changing, and only work on that. But the debouncing that we are going to implement, I'm not sure where are the issues for this. I guess Tristan can talk more to it when he sees this recording. But like the debouncing would solve that problem, because if we set debounce for like a half a second, that will fix the initial
100%.
multiple events. Cool. And just to answer the question, like I'm not gonna speak for everyone. Me personally, I would be pretty keen to use RxJS like everywhere. When we already introduced it for event handling, and we might want to chain, when config changes, this and this changes, we want to trigger another event. So it will probably make sense. But I wouldn't like try to do it as a targeted effort. I think that everybody will pick it organically when they see that they can. All right. Next one is we finally removed message handler. Just a quick note, that's the one that I was talking about. This is the issue. This is the last merge request. I'm super happy. Message for people who don't know, message handler was a initial class that the language server was pretty much started with, as it was a language server was started as a prototype, and that prototype already had message handler in it. That was the one class that was responsible for handling every single JSON RPC message that came through. It had direct access to connection, and at the beginning it also implemented all the features, so all the code suggestions logic was in the message handler. And over the last maybe 8 months, we were the whole team was trying to split this into separate, first just classes and then dependency injected classes, and that's going to be concluded with this merge request. And since then, the new approach, the new pattern is to always create a dependency injected handler that so far we are putting those handlers in the connection service, but John is working hard on some way how to make this even more distributed. So there is not going to be one single class that does all the registering, but John is, for example, exploring to use decorators for it, which looked pretty cool. And a last note from me, I started applying this pattern in the VS Code extension. So VS Code extension doesn't have any dependency injection yet, and every class that needs to be accessed by multiple classes is pretty much singleton, and it's a pattern that's been in the extension since the beginning, and it's now becoming more and more painful since you can from everywhere reach to anything and you don't know what the dependencies are. And also the singleton, and I'll show that in the code. Where are we here? So in the extension, if you have a look at the extension TS, and like if I'm boring you, just stop me. I know that this, but like you see that you are activating heaps of things. And if you look at init, those are usually the singletons. So the singleton is created like this. You export instance of the class, but that means that the constructor has to be empty, and you pass it the dependencies with init. And like that works okay, but it means that there is like an implicit dependency. Maybe something depends, like the issuable controller depends on context utils, let's say. And so you have to call context utils init before the issuable controller init. Otherwise, it all blows up. You might have seen sometimes extension state is not initialized error. That was exactly this caused by this. And like the solution is to pass the dependencies in or use dependency injection. And so I propose this pattern to like get us halfway there. And now I lost is this the one? No. I'll just click here again. It might have been it. So instead of having the just exported instance, you can, I'll propose that we do this. So you create a variable inside of that module, and then you create two classes but again, export it as a singleton pretty much, but with a little bit of extra steps. Like the extra step here is that you wrap it, you just can't access the variable directly, but there is a getter which means that once we introduce dependency injection, we can replace this with container get instance of extension state, and that will help us move to the dependency injection eventually. And then also a huge benefit from my perspective is that we have this setter that sets the global instance, which means that all the dependencies that you have, you can specify them in the constructor. That makes the code cleaner because then you don't have to mark this as optional and everywhere in the code say, like, if this is missing, throw an error saying this class hasn't been initialized yet. So it allows cleaner constructor that defines the dependencies, and this getter also allows us to use the dependency container in the future. So I suggest we do that.
Sounds good for me.
Awesome. And I'll finish the monologue real quick. There is Frederick's suggestion that we use left hook, and I can stop talking. Frederick, take it away.
Yeah, so thanks, Thomas. Initially, so I had reached out into the language server channel and I asked if we could do a CI job that would fail before pretty much everything else if it failed to compile for TypeScript compilation. And I've looked into different kind of configuration and I wasn't satisfied, mostly because even to test the compilation, you still need to like install, and it being the first step would mean install and compile and then fail. It would either need to be its own stage or have needs, right, for all of their jobs so that subsequent job would fail. Because the idea is if it doesn't compile with TypeScript, you shouldn't even run everything else. You should just stop and tell the dev to go back and start with that because everything else is kind of meaningless. And so there are some ways to do that. You can make every job on failure auto-cancel. I pretty much hate this because there are a lot of jobs that you want to see everything that fails, right? The ESLint and Jest, and you need all of that information. But for TypeScript, it felt like we could go to the source and be like, you can't even at first I had put commit, but Thomas, I think you're right. Maybe pre-push would be better. So like if you're trying to push to the branch and it doesn't compile with TypeScript, you shouldn't push. Like you can ignore. Go ahead, Angelo. Yeah, I know you're not happy.
My question is why not just make it like a parallel job so that like we don't increase the length of the job time, and yeah, I mean, I'm not against putting it in left hook. I personally don't use it left hook because I hate pre-commit hooks. That's just my philosophy.
I get it.
Personally don't like it, but like, or maybe both. Like, why not both? But I would say parallel job just because then you can you can know immediately that it fails, but also the rest of the linting happens. So I don't know. That was just my suggestion.
I mean, I agree. I think, but this is curious. So that we have a job called compiles script, right? And it does run npm run compile in it, but I don't know if it's. I have to look more. I don't know if it runs all the time, and if it does, why I'm not seeing it fail. Because for me, it always passes even when my TypeScript fails. But it does run npm run compile, so maybe it doesn't exist.
Maybe
failure.
Maybe that's a bug then, because
yeah.
It should fail if your TypeScript fails.
Yeah. So, but I agree. We should do both, and that's a valid point because there's no reason not to have a CI job because you could ignore left hook or you could right. But for that very early feedback for myself at least, I always think that like people can disable left hook if they don't like it. I used to hate it and now I like it if it's not abusive. So far, like the TypeScript run compiled in the left hook takes about 5 to 10 second ish if depending on a few things, but it seems quick enough for me to be worth it on at least on pre-push so that it prevents me from being like, good, great, this is fine, and then having to wait a long time. But I'm gonna investigate then why compile script doesn't return failure, or maybe it does and I haven't even noticed. And then the other part from Thomas that I was curious about, and I also kind of agree, is that the current CI runtime is pretty high for the size of the project. It seems to me that what takes the most time is the Windows unit test
Yeah,
runner, like
Windows,
everything
yeah.
integration,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's when and I commented on that issue. So basically, we have a few options. So like we need Windows coverage. That's for sure. And the reason why is like we've had like 3 incidents already without on Windows machines. So like the open tabs, file system stuff like just wasn't working for a week or actually 2 weeks because someone made a change in that area of the source code, the file system source code, and it just wasn't working. But we didn't know because we didn't have any Windows runners at all that are actually because the file system's different. So there's like a few options. There's one, I need to reach out to we punted it 1 milestone, but I need to reach out to the CI team because right now there's no like cached VMs for Windows. So like when you spin up a Linux GitLab runner, it just like goes like that, right? But Windows takes 5 minutes. So we could shave off our entire thing by like 5, even maybe 7 minutes just by like getting that. But then also like we don't need to run the entire Windows stuff uh like for like changes that you're probably making, Frederick.
Yeah.
So I haven't investigated like the extent of like how GitLab does conditional file changes. Like if you make a change in XYZ area, trigger this job, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if that's a thing. But even if it is a thing, sometimes like you have like a dependency on something and we'd have to like move all our code, this file, system stuff to a specific area and then like configure it to look at that folder. Um, so I don't know. That's like something we gotta like think through.
Yeah,
But
but possibly as a first iteration, that I think would be pretty safe would be to at least exclude like a MR who only touches packages, right?
yeah, exactly.
I-
Yes. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So instead
Eventually maybe
of
do like
moving,
package, move it all to a package and then only run it for that package, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's a good point. Like we can exclude Windows stuff from packages folder because it's not in the packages right now. It's in the source. So yeah, that's a good point.
I wonder also if there could be some benefit in moving the Windows stuff as a downstream pipeline. Um, I, there's some shenanigans we could do. Like I guess it really depends on like the level of confidence we have in like our process
I don't want
container.
somebody to release language server and it's failing and then because our stuff is not like GitLab where we get some time. It's not like the monolith where you get some time
Yeah.
to screw up and then they redo it. Like if you screw up and then they release, then you have an incident, right? So
Yeah, but
that's
you can make downstream mandatory to pass though. Like I'm not saying like making it like a different thing, but
maybe we can run it
yeah.
only on tags, but I just don't. You don't probably want to fail the job only on tags. So I don't know.
Mm.
We could maybe run them on the merge train. That's an option.
Yeah.
That means that, like, yes, it would be annoying when you already get all the approvals and you get a thumbs ups and you say, okay, I'm merging this. And then it's like, Windows
Yeah.
run and it failed. On the other hand, it's a little bit flaky, if I'm not mistaken. Like it fails 1 in 10, 1 in 15. It fails, like the integration test just fails without
Yeah.
any issues. So that would be extra annoying on merge trains. On the other hand, you would be getting much quicker feedback on your merge requests as you are like writing the merge request. It would be a trade-off.
Yeah. We
But
can change.
I agree with Anshul that like if we are releasing incidents, then it is perfectly common that you merge your merge request, release language server, and release the VS Code extension in short succession.
Yeah, definitely. And I think What could be interesting is you're talking about having it on merge train. That's a good option. And if we do that, what we can do is have it as a manual job for normal pipeline. So you can, if you think you've touched something and you can just run it, right? You can start it and then get that feedback on your MR at any time. But then if you don't know or you don't think it applies, then it will only run on the merge train. That way you get really quick feedback. We're protected against the merge on main. And if you touch something and you're a maintainer, you think this is relevant, you run the job on the EMR. You don't have to wait for merge train.
Yeah, that's a good point. But it would be eventually good to have like it be conditional. So like we could do it in iteration,
Yes.
like have iteration 1, merge train, iteration 2, conditional. Yeah, because yeah, it's definitely there's a lot of gotchas in file system stuff. It's crazy.
Yes. So automation, 100%. Like no, like yeah, it failed. It's fine. I'm gonna merge anyway.
Yeah.
I just say the whole again. Now unmute it. I'm saying it's a little bit trickier in language server because we have so much file system logic there when we are parsing the repositories. In VS Code extension, we went full circle with introducing Windows integration tests, having them run for like a year without any failure, just delaying the pipeline for like a 5-10 minutes each, and then we remove them.
And that made a lot of developers sad.
There is one small thing I wanted to mention. Yeah, can I ask you, Frederick, whether you would be so kind and create an issue for this speed up of the pipeline? I think that would be like it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, I'll create an issue and I'll update my MR.
I think you created a spike already, Tomas. We just need to add the comments on like everything we talked about on the spike.
A spike in language server.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah. Because I was gonna pick it up next milestone. I don't know if you'll be assigning. Oh, you put author, yeah. Spike.
Speed up integration tests. Here we go. I'll link it in the.
Yeah, we just need to add like more
yeah,
stuff on.
if you Frederick would please just put the things that we talked about on there. Quick note: you can't use log debug in the DI constructors. It's because by default we have log level info, and the DI initialization happens way before we receive the configuration from the client saying whether you want a log level debug or what log level you want. And so only info and higher works when we are initializing DI. It's like a gotcha. Aaron was suggesting that we will create some linting for it. I'm 100% open for anyone doing that, but like you also notice that your debug logs are not like it's a issue that happens to you once when you are developing a DI component. And that's that. That's everything on the agenda. We removed the message handler. That's great. And huge thanks to Tristan, who took on the organizing, which means creating the issue and writing several reminders to people to vote. And if anyone would be keen on taking it on next month, let us know in the Slack channel. Any of the TypeScript Slack channels.
Sounds good.
All right. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Hey, thanks for the meeting.
All right. Thank you as well. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.